Okay, so what's our topic today there, Jason?
How to handle players who ignore the story.
Okay, so let's say, so there's looking at it from a DM's perspective.
Hmm.
You are a DM and you've got, let's say, a group of, we'll say, three players. You've got two that are kind of gung ho, they're kind of for the story. Let's make up a example story here. You've got two players who are down for this heroic adventure to go and save the princess, and you've got your third player who is generally less so. What's you as a DM, how you kind of do you rein this player in? Are you correcting how their character plays? How do you look at this circumstance, and is it something you correct, or do you not care that their player, their character doesn't actually care about the story?
Well, there's a really good set of questions right there on that one. Personally, the first thing I would probably ask myself is how much do I know of this player? And do they happen to shift in their behavior depending on what you're doing in the overall gameplay session? Like, I've known numerous players who will ham it up excessively when it comes to story elements and interacting with other people,
And
but they don't give a crap about combat.
they might become much more disconnected.
Yeah,
Or
and
you may have more some who are much more engaged during combat but less disconnected with story.
mhm.
What if you have a player who is generally connected and paying attention when it comes to story, but they don't seem to be vibing with the story that you're trying to tell, but the other ones are?
Then there's the question of, is this something that's happening in their is it specifically this session that they are acting like this, or has it been this way multiple sessions? Because in order to understand if there is a problem, you have to see that there's a trend and it's repeating over and
Okay.
over again.
You presented this as a duality of two
Yeah.
options, so let's approach it as such. So let's approach it from the first aspect. Let's say that this is a new occurrence. They've generally been down for the story and following things, but now let's say they've broken character and their character was previously following the story, and now they've become disconnected and they're not following it when they previously were.
Then there's a few different options, I would say. First and foremost, it may be due to some problem in their life that is just occurring recently.
Maybe they're put off from D&D as a whole and they're having trouble like getting into the spirit of things.
It might be that, or it might be like one of our other players is recently, who happens also dungeon master in some campaigns. He's he's having a hard time at various things.
Okay, yeah, because you might have some things in life or
Yeah.
other things, and it could put you off from things. Okay, let's say that the player, it's not a new change. They've been consistently throughout the campaign. They have not been interested in following the story you've presented for them.
And then the question is, have they been really into past campaigns or not?
Well, let's
If
say they
if
have.
they have, it might be just a style tone change in campaign. Some players like campaigns that move along a lot faster or slower.
Are you looking to veer your campaign to suit the player then here, or is it more of a conversation that you would then immediately have with the player?
I would definitely go with the conversation with the player. Like,
You'd
is
go
there
with the
is there like,
conversation with the player before
yeah,
you alter your game.
yeah, I would go ahead and ask, are they enjoying the game? It's perfectly fine if you say no, or if you feel that the player is going to not say anything negative about your game specifically. You might end up asking or denoting what campaigns or styles of campaigns they have enjoyed in the past, and go from there. Because sometimes some people don't really care for a, a campaign that's very a very puzzly campaign or something like
True.
that.
A lot of people are not down for puzzles. I've noticed that with the amount of one shots that I've run, which I've run probably almost 100 one shots at this point. A very large number of one
Yeah,
shots.
a lot of one
A
shots.
lot of one shots. I very rarely do puzzles because maybe it's our group particularly people aren't that interested in doing puzzles. So if I do one, I keep it very simple. But I could see that if you ran an entire campaign that veered towards this mechanic that your group tends to not favor towards, it really could put people off.
Mm-hmm.
Same deal if you have a more RP heavy group and you run a more combat focused campaign, that could really throw people off.
There's also I just remembered something. Remember last time you ran Balthasar's Maze
Yes.
when you had those special quirk characteristics that were
Yes,
into
that did really throw people
Yeah.
off. Yeah. I think that could work with dependent on what the players are, but with the players that I had for that group, it wasn't the most functionally well as I would like, and it definitely threw people off. And it could have been a mistake, or it could have been poor forethought, but it could have gone better. And I, as a DM, am at fault for that to an extent. But it is just a realm of like who the players are and what you're running, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose for my aspect of it, I suppose
Just a tiny aside. Balthasar's Maze was a maze that he set up that had all these multiple rooms where players can go into. There was puzzles there. There was various combats,
loot
loot
rooms,
rooms,
different.
healing rooms. Where there was a magical person standing in the center of the room that heals
It
people.
was very game-esque.
Yes. And in Balthazar's Maze, the characters were often assigned quirk characteristics, like they could only ask questions.
Frequently talked in questions.
Or frequently
perhaps.
talked in questions, or some characters could only... they either could talk only in 3 or 4 words or at a time.
Very simplistic. I would generally assign a quirk to your character to kind of. The idea for it for me was that I was trying to pull some kind of idea or fun thing to RP out for the player, because a lot of the players that we tend to have will play very samey characters, and by doing this I could break them out of their shells and try and get them to do other things. But the issue that I ran into was that the people who don't run into that issue of playing samey characters were wholeheartedly down, and they tried these new interesting concepts that I did, and the people that weren't so forthright in coming out of their shells were a little bit troubled in trying to play these characters, and were actually being annoyed by the people who were trying these more outlandish character concepts. And it was kind of a frustration of both ends because of this. Because you have some that aren't really doing things or playing their character how it's really set up. And you have ones that are, but when they do that, it's more on the outlandish side to where it's bothering others.
I'm in the outlandish.
He is in the outlandish side.
I come up with characters, characters who have weird quirks or a weird combination of characteristics tied together, and I just go off in that direction. Like Grohl, the Void Speaker, like always talking to everything in like the wall or the floor,
Yeah.
or a potted plant. And then I've also had Brother Bob, who...
So
how long did it take for people to process this? The only thing he ever says is saying, "Hello, my name is Brother Bob," and all he would do is gestures or basic motions after that.
Yup.
But yeah, I do tend to have that chaos goblin when I roleplay characters.
I will say I fall into a more passive route than you. So into the initial question of how to handle players who ignore the story, you would veer towards talking to the players. Mind you, dependent on the situation, I'll talk to the players, but I tend to, maybe it's a reflection of me thinking it's something I need to change with my own campaign, but I choose to do that and try and change my game to adapt to the players and what they're interested in. Even not even just like in my pre-session prep, but also in the session itself.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm feeling like my players aren't enjoying what they're doing or they're kind of a little thrown off, I'll throw them a bone and adjust things in the background to try and make things flow a little nice for them to make it a more fun or interesting dynamic session. A good example would be easy to remember. I ran a Coliseum one shot lately, or I did it. I ran it 2 times
Two
with two
different groups,
separate
but I happen to
groups.
be in both of them.
You happen to be in both groups.
I
So
played the same character in both of them too.
in the first group, we ran into the situation we had a new player who had never done D&D before or combat, so it was all a lot, especially for a more combat focused game. It was hard for them to get into it and figure out what D&D is all about and all that when it's a more combat focused game and they don't understand combat. With that, it felt more natural to get into the RP of things, so I added a dungeon breakout thing to the Coliseum that was absolutely just off the top of my head. That wasn't initially planned, right? With that, it played out generally pretty well, and I think it really upped the satisfaction of the session forward. And I almost think that it accomplished the same thing in the follow up session where I included it, but it actually, I was surprised the players took the RP exit of the jailbreak, the less combat focused one. Mind you, I suppose it could have been because I offered it as an idea that they felt like they were narratively supposed to do it. But really, it was just an option of whichever one they wanted to do, right? And I think you understood that in the moment, but it's not like you can explicitly say so to the other
I know,
players.
I got that. It was one of those things. The first time you ran it, I literally had my character like sit in the cell
Yep.
originally, just because I realized in this moment that was an option given forth, and I was personally observing how each player was mentally reacting to the discovery of this secret passage in the wall that went down a mysterious corridor. So it was rather interesting in itself, and I often ask myself the question of do players just automatically default to, just because the dungeon master has created this thing before them, do they immediately go to it,
Are they going to latch on?
or are they gonna just question it and then go automatically in the other direction?
Because a lot of the time, your players who have played for a long time, who build into the yes and dynamic of things, they accept that thing that you pitch to them and they're going to freely follow that, which can be nice. But when you're setting up a multiple option thing where it's not a railroad, it is a dynamic of they really get to decide their fates. They end up locking themselves into the last thing you may have suggested because that's what's the new yes and.
That is quite possible.
So I suppose for me, I try and tailor my campaign to my players. In that situation, I will try and adjust things into a way that I might think would be more enjoyable to them, be it may focus more towards RP or focus more towards combat or focus more towards the actual background of their character and try and build that out. And if after I've exhausted, let's say, 3, 4, 5 paths of trying to draw that character back in and get them really having a good time, if they still don't seem to be vibing with the campaign or the flow of things, then for me it'd be more of a personal conversation of a check-in, because maybe I might be misunderstanding social cues, or maybe I might be understanding it properly and it really is just a, hey, maybe the next campaign's a better one for them, or maybe the way I DM isn't the exactly what works for them in an enjoyment factor, right? Because not every DM is for every player, and every player is for every DM, right?
We have this example going on with one of our extremely experienced DMs. We have this is a part of the whole thing. We have one DM who is a chaos gremlin as a DM.
You're talking about John or me?
My brother.
Okay, John.
And some players like more structure,
I'm good with either.
and some players want a more natural flow to the world, and kind of having these little series of chaos moments jump out at you constantly,
Yes.
or these large
A non-linear story.
yeah, non-linear stories, or these big leaps in progression or events, etc.
Especially
Sometimes,
your level or where you
your
are in the
level.
world.
Yeah, sometimes will throw people off too. Some
Especially what items you have access to. My gosh, that'll throw them off.
Oh yeah, the vicious antimatter
The
rifle.
vicious antimatter
Giving a
rifle
rogue an vicious antimatter
that
rifle
has
is crazy.
sneak attack.
Is ridiculous and crazy.
But if the DM can make it work, and it generally makes for fun sessions, obviously, how do you balance around that? But if the DM is having fun with it and the player's having fun with it, have fun with it. It's in the game for a reason. It's not to not get used.
Yeah.
It's the way I look at a lot of magic items, right? That's where the deck of many things falls for me as well.
Oh yeah, and that goes
It's-
back into the same player yet again. And when the deck of many things gets pulled out, he becomes extremely hesitant
Yes.
about the whole situation. He understands that the deck of many things can be this whole campaign gets upended and slides entirely
Wrenches that change the dynamic of things are can be a difficulty for some players, especially to adapt to, because you have a, let's say, a core understanding of, not necessarily understanding, an expectation of how the game is going to flow, and when something adjusts that flow to be either a higher or lower ratio of how the liquid is coming out of it, it can really throw off a player and make them either have more or less enjoyment, right? Depending on if that's something that they're interested in.
Yep. The whole player having difficulty getting into the story can be just due to the fact that they are mentally, they're either, it could be potentially a situation where they're trying to actually, they're not interacting with the DM or the players because they're mentally working so hard to try to make sense of what's going on,
Yeah.
that they will literally just stop and just sit there and watch very carefully what's going on. It's sort of a situation where the story or the environment has become so complex or hyperactive
Yeah.
that it actually causes them to actually lose verisimilitude. I can't pronounce that word for
You're
life
good.
of me. But they pull themselves out of the story because now there's this really complex thing going on, and they now have to
Now they have to
process it and try to figure
and
out
then
all the
reinvest in the story.
Yeah, and-
they've lost their level of investment once something have been so estranged
yeah.
that now they feel disconnected. And they need to find that investment to actually be involved again. And if they can't, then how do they be involved?
And it's not even just the investment level, it's also the fact that it might be they're now trying to logic their way through what's happening in front of them.
But it could be so absurd, antimatter rifle vicious,
Yes.
that it really does just throw them off to the point of
Party jumping 4 levels.
Exactly, party jumping 4 levels in a session, right? That it could just really throw them off. But from a DM's perspective, personally, I'm okay with the party jumping 4 levels in a session if the campaign that you want to run is a medium to high level campaign and you want to just rush through those early levels. Why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? What's wrong with that, right? What's stopping you? if that's where the fun thing that you want to run is,
People are gonna start arguing. They might actually,
yeah,
might be the few
tippy tappy tap.
yeah.
The comment section.
Why don't you just start that campaign at higher levels?
Because I like to start things with a fresh character myself and kind of build up their story. And I feel like when you start at level like 4, level 5, your character is already not necessarily a demigod, but you should be generally well established in the world.
Time skip.
Kind of. But then it's how does the group know each other?
Well, you have the initial thing. You play like the first 2 or 3 levels.
Oh, you can do a
and then
time
you can
skip.
just do a time skip up a few years. Like you guys went and got stuck on an island somewhere.
I feel like the time skip would then include the thing that I always love to do in some one shots, which you've been a part of a large number of my one shots, where I'll ask specific questions that build out the story of what's already previously happened.
That would be a really interesting video in itself, of as your whole outline on how to improvise in and invent a story in a.
I feel like those are really fun one shots.
Yeah, I know. I know. He has this really cool system where he has everyone come to the game
with nothing built out.
Nothing
really.
built already, and he basically asks you.
I have a
looks
large.
at what have you build a character, and then looks at your character.
Yeah, everyone
and then constructs a system around that.
Yep, everyone pre-sets up characters, and then I pre-set up. I already have a number of basic general questions that I plan to ask to build out the session, but I additionally have some specific questions to the characters. So, for example, I'll start them with magical items, and then I'll immediately be asking them where they obtain that magical item, or based on what they selected, I'll ask them, for example, what was the most interesting way you've used that alchemy jug to get yourself out of a rough bind? Right? So it forces the players to improv, tell me a story, and it kind of builds out their character and how they function, right? Or I'll also have let's say, tell me the story about how so and so saved your life back when you barely even knew them, right? So you're kind of creating this connection between the two of the characters, just baseline. That's just now a core fundamental fact of the world, right? And I'll have a lot of these interconnected questions as well as general group questions about how the group functions, the dynamic there, if they're working for people, all that. And then we'll progress to having a fully created group, their dynamic, and what their goal is. And it's almost entirely created by the players, which to me, you end up dodging the entire factor of players ignoring the story, because at this point everyone's invested in the story because they've all helped build this story already. It's like a full campaign worth of story building compacted into the first like hour and a half of a one-shot session.
Yeah.
That then plays out to what ends up being like the campaign story arc as the ending of the one-shot.
Yeah, it's almost like a mini campaign where the first few chapters were already done. The players basically just flash forward through that section, with building their backstories, and then they arrive at like a midpoint or the end point
where you guys define what those chapters are to figure out what the then next steps of an ending would be.
And that could also answer the original question of this whole thing is sometimes when players are in a campaign and they check out, is
they
sometimes
don't feel like they're actually playing
a part
role.
of the world. They're not part of the game anymore, or the world is just or the other players are dictating how the adventure is going more, and they're just kind of being just dragged along at that point.
Like when the other players are the main character and you're just a side character.
Yeah. So that's another thing to look at as a dungeon master or game master, is to ask yourself, is the other players also just kind of just taking over too much of the game? and the other person just can't get in on it, and they kind of just shut off and
That
go
asks
outside.
that makes me question if you've noticed something. Every single Saturday night when we have our campaign, there's
Hmm.
something that I actively do. I consistently mute up. There's a lot of times where I'll mute up, especially if I feel like I've had large talking sections throughout different parts of what we've been doing, either for that session or the one previously, where I mute up, even if it creates a dead silence for a little bit where someone else has to pause and then jump in. I try and
Hmm.
avoid being the one to jump in because I don't want to like take the limelight because I'm more than happy to go and jump in and be like this talking figure to the session, right?
Hmm.
But I don't want to overshadow everyone else's story or be this like huge prominent figure of our group, right? So I actively
That's
cite
really hard to do with Otto.
I
Every,
active
his every
Yep,
interaction with the world is a chaos
I
trip. Yep,
know.
that just chaos rolls it into a whole nother
So
scenario.
so I actively stifle myself a
Hmm.
large amount of the time. I'll NPC encounters where I'm not directly the involvement, I'll mute up so that I'm not adding side tangents so we can build up the others. Have you
Yeah.
noticed I do that? I do that a lot.
You do that on occasion, and I also will do it on occasion too. Sometimes I'll just do it because I know I'm literally not immediately at the spot at the moment. I'm kind of off the side over somewhere
And then you
else,
don't want to
and I
interrupt what
just
they're doing.
yeah I just
Which,
mute my mic and just let people
without
go.
naming names, we definitely have people who will just immediately jump in. They're nowhere near involved. Mind you, there's not it's not wrong of them to jump in and start talking with their friends and put in their little tidbits, but it can be a little bit interrupty depending on what's occurring, right?
Oh, particularly on and when you play online, and
Yes.
you're talking over a mic, you
There's
have a
an
situation where people can't hear the other
there's
conversations and
also
that.
inherently a time frame delay between when things are heard.
Hmm.
You'd think it's very close to instant, but even let's say on Wednesday nights when I hang out with Paul, right, where
Hmm.
we'll be in the same fuck words, we'll be in the same room, but I'll hear the Discord delay is like 2 seconds when we're sitting literally back to back.
Yeah.
And I mean, that pause there creates so many times where people will end up talking over each other on accident.
Yep.
But I suppose for me, I'm in the club of I will adjust the campaign to try and adapt to the players. But if I still feel that they're not necessarily enjoying it, I'll try and make it a conversation and talk to them in an easy way, not in a accusatory way, but just in like a check in, right? Because if they're not feeling it, let's say that some people, it's I mean it's your friends. You don't want to just be the one to like step up because you're not feeling it. It's easier if someone gives you an out, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So I'll end up talking, offer it up, make sure check in, life, everything okay, because maybe someone needs just like even a session or two to just check out for a little bit and get their life
Hmm.
sorted a little, and then get back into things.
Now to me. Oh, my first thought is, have I been playing or running games for this group for a long time? If the answer is I've been with this group for a long time, I then mentally go back through all the interactions in the past,
Of
through the
what they're interested in.
yeah, through
Okay.
the different campaigns and adventures, different dungeon masters running their campaigns, and I think about like ask myself the question, when does this person become really interested in the adventure? When do they don't become interested in the adventure? And what is the stuff of that bothers them the most? And I've asked myself about this question. I even do this when the person is entirely new to the game. Like
Yeah.
we have like one person.
Watching for the things that
Yeah,
pique their interest,
yeah,
like chopping off penises.
yes, yes. The Monday group.
The Monday group.
The Monday group. Yeah, probably should add some more girls to that group.
That sounds hectic.
That's But anyways, even with your brother,
Yes.
I've from the very first moment he came in, he was also a new player as well. I noticed he strongly prefers spellcasters.
He does strongly prefer spellcasters.
He actually prefers characters that have more complex features. Even from the start, the first class he started playing was, I forgot off the top
I
of my
think
head.
it was a wizard.
It was a wizard or an artificer. No, it was a wizard.
I think it was a wizard. And then he
And-
made an artificer for a one shot. It was an alchemist, which alchemists were at the time not updated, so they were generally bad.
Yeah. So he went from wizard. He did wizard and then alchemist. He did a fairy wizard on his
Yup.
first character too.
Which is crazy.
So he dived
And
into
it was jumping into a multi-leveled campaign at that point.
That
I
was
think it
lit-
like
that
level
was
7 or
literally-
8.
that was literally the last chapter of that campaign. Like we were going up to the BBEG's his final stage.
Yup.
He jumped in on that. He also played that artificer. He then went on to play a druid as well.
All the complex ones.
Yeah, he strongly favors the most complex character class, species / character class combinations possible. I've also noticed even with his warlock, not his. He also played a warlock too.
Yeah, I believe so.
He also played with his wizard and his artificer and even his druid. He has a strong preference towards picking spells that are more tool based
Utility.
or utility.
Yeah.
Where instead of say like casting fireball or
chromatic orb. that
chromatic
just bounces
orb or anything like
wildly,
that,
just deleting
he chooses stuff like shape water, lesser restoration, and etc.
things. Yeah.
Mending,
The
etc.
interesting ones that a lot of people overlook.
Yeah, he strongly favors the tool utility spells. And he also tries to work out situations where he tries to work in physics situations where his character uses a spell that causes a thing to go off.
Dialing you back in to now you read into the new players and what they enjoy. How do you then delve that, or sorry, retroactively use that into your campaign to dial them in and draw them into it?
Well, the first and foremost is sometimes when people are new to a game, they come in with preconceived perceptions of what a game or what their ideal character type would be.
Yeah.
Some people have a very strong tendency towards certain frameworks or perceptions of themselves as an individual, and they naturally want to play a game that plays off of that.
Like those weird players that only play like rogues and warlocks and whatnot.
Or we could say like some players, we actually have a exceedingly talented game master in one of our groups. He comes in and out every so often, but he's always a 5-star player when he's in it. Once he clicks in, who has a exceedingly strong propensity to play barbarians, fighters,
Very simplistic in classes.
Yeah, he's one of those people
notoriously dragonborn.
Notoriously dragonborn, but he also plays Goliath and anything else. He has a extremely strong propensity towards the really big, the really powerful characters that can do a buttload of pounding damage. Not necessarily casting spells to do a lot of damage, but just like that. And he really enjoys the imagery of being big and strong and powerful.
He is a generally larger guy. Not like fat or anything
No,
like that, but
he's
generally
not.
a larger person.
And sometimes people will, say, play characters that are not entirely like themselves
For him, not the case.
to explore into something, to learn something. And then some people will just naturally just go ahead and make characters that are basically them.
Yes.
but cranked up to 11 or 12.
Yes.
And that's also perfectly fine to do. Sometimes, though, I do notice that when players do that all the time, they can actually run into a situation where uh, they get into this routine where they do the same thing over and over again and they kind of burn themselves out. And
Yes.
then they eventually go off and do something else different. Like, he actually plays all those barbarians and fighters and stuff, but he also at one point shifted towards playing more rogues,
Yeah.
and he also played a druid as well, and he had a ton of fun with the druid. And off of doing that, he also slid off and started playing more classes that are not just the straight on barbarian or fighter or type or paladin.
For me, it's more of a let's say as a player,
Mm-hmm.
it's a I like to have an idea of what my character would like to be good at. It might be a very specific thing. Um, let's take a let's take an example of the niche of Otto Neverlucky. Is his niche is he's just full RNG, random number generator.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to happen. I don't know what it is. And then as a player, I'm going to build my character in all these different fun, fantastical ways that I don't know how things are going to roll out. It's just going to happen the way it does. Wild Magic Sorcerer, right?
That's actually a really fun build character, and you probably should make a video going over Otto Neverlucky and his two or three different versions.
Probably.
Yeah.
So I suppose let's uh, assuming we're working towards an end,
Yeah.
but we'll get there in a second. Continue.
And I go through the mental history of the player and how they like to play, and then I try to either adjust my campaign first and foremost as it's going along, as I see them interacting, just like you.
Yeah.
And then I might actually like eventually ask them questions about their stuff or other people. Actually, before asking them, but between adjusting, I'll ask someone else.
To what their observation
Yeah,
is
what
on
their
the subject matter.
observation about the person, like with
Not
your,
in a sense of talking behind their
Yeah.
back,
Yeah,
but just in a sense of we're all friends here,
Yeah.
and how can we make this person have more fun as well?
like I asked you a few questions about your brother, the new
Yes.
player, as to his proclivity towards basically building characters that are almost entirely nothing but utility spells.
Yes.
And his first wizard, was almost nothing but utility spells.
Yes.
And he only had a few offensive spells. And I also noticed that he actually got really frustrated with that
Because he couldn't do anything in combat.
yeah, because he ran into a situation where he only had one or two offensive spells.
I don't think they worked against what we were fighting
And
either.
we ran into creatures that were literally immune to that particular element of damage. And this could actually be a problem that you can run into with a lot of new players. I've done this myself when I was first new, and I've also done this in video games too, where I've had this preconceived notion of like playing Armored Core Armored Core 2 for the PlayStation 2 or Armored Core 3. When I got in, first time playing Armored Core, I'm like looking at the stats of the units. I'm like, oh, I'm going to use quad legs on my AC. I'm going to be able to fire my cannons as I slide across the ground
Yes.
and do all my awesome little things. And then I start
Then
playing,
then you can't.
and then I do that, and
Or
I
you
find
can't do
I
that.
find out that I personally find out it doesn't really match how I enjoy playing it.
Go.
And you can actually run into this situation why a player might actually disconnect from your story or campaign because
They
they
might
might
not be filling their character.
they might actually they might run into a situation where they came up with a concept for a character and it's just not working for them, and because they're not enjoying their character, they actually retreat away from the story itself because they're not enjoying socializing as that character with other characters.
Be it based on their background, the story to the character,
Yeah.
or the actual mechanics of how the character works.
Mm-hmm.
either in combat or out thereof.
By the way, I solved my problem in Armored Core by going with tank. I love tank treads.
I I I know you love tanks. I've seen your artificers.
Yes.
Okay, so let's look for a satisfying ending here, I do suppose. Let's say that we've got that situation where we've got a player who is ignoring the story. What's your advice to a DM out there, which I'll give my own as well? What's your advice to a DM out there of how to approach this problem? Let's say you've got a player who has been in the campaign for a number of time, and the DM isn't quite feeling like the player's enjoying their sessions.
Well, if this player has enjoyed past campaigns and sessions and they're very interactive, uh, you end up with adjusting your current campaign ever so slightly towards something that they would engage with. If they don't, then you might ask other people around you, around them, like, is there anything wrong with them in their life going on? And then you, if that doesn't yield anything, you might actually just ask the player or what is the issue at hand, such as I noticed that you seem to not be particularly engaged with the story or the adventure. Uh, what is there anything particularly going on with you at this point? As in a, it's really hard to phrase this because it's
Oh
specifically a
God.
thing that relates to each person. Because some people naturally might become more defensive depending on how you phrase things, and some people might not be so defensive.
Can I ask you a
And some people
difficult
might just
question?
literally, some people might just say it's perfectly fine and just continue rolling on.
Can I ask you a difficult question then?
Yeah.
So let's say you've got the situation where it's a newer player there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The newer player seems to have that level of disconnect, and you talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, I'm not speaking from experience here, but I think that there could be a large amount of these situations where people wanted to do D&D,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe that person enjoys doing D&D, or at least enjoys going and being with their friends and having that social interaction, that game night and that fun with their friends.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they aren't necessarily feeling D&D. So they're not connecting with the story and having fun there.
We're sliding towards the beer and pretzels versus.
Yes, the beer and pretzel. How do you react and deal with that situation if you've got someone who is there to have a good time but isn't enjoying the D&D aspect or the fun aspect. So they're not necessarily committed in that factor.
There's a lot of different ways to think of that. You can either just allow for some social times for everyone to hang out and talk about various things at the beginning and end of your sessions, and occasionally in the middle. If you have run particularly long sessions. However, we have found that in some beer and pretzels groups, that if you allow for a lot of middle hangouts,
Are you talking about when we do shots?
the shots thing. Sometimes you can end up with a situation where people slide towards the beer and the social hangout kind of thing as opposed to actually playing the game.
Yes.
So much that they actually cause the entire game to
Oh my gosh, yes, that occurs.
to divert into a situation where you might have like 5 hours of material, but you only do 30 minutes of it. Kind of situation.
It makes prepping as a DM so much easier.
Yes, it does. I do agree with that. And then you have to ask yourself.
And then they had a good time as well. And then you have to question, like, well, I guess my players had fun. I didn't get to run what I wanted to run.
Oh yeah,
But they had a good time.
Yeah,
They're all happy. Am I wrong?
well, that's a good point in itself, right there. But you have to like stop for a moment and ask, what's the most important thing? Is it just important for everyone to have fun, or do we want to actually go through the adventure? And do you want to like to find out where everyone in that group is on a spectrum. And what we ended up doing, kind of, in our multiple groups, is that we have one group that is more full in on the action, do the things.
I
Kind of
feel
group.
like you're on the Tuesday campaign there.
There's the Monday game, which is more.
Monday's not that.
Monday's
Tuesday is
beer and
most
pretzel.
of that. Yeah, Monday's beer
And then
pretzel.
Saturday is really into that.
I feel like Saturday is the more in between.
Yeah.
I think Tuesday we're gung ho do the thing.
You know, it kind of switches off on the
It,
Saturday
it does
and
a
Tuesday.
little, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's been more Tuesday lately.
Yeah, it by the
Mind
way,
you, it's not necessarily like a more concrete, solid
Yeah.
story, but it is progression.
yeah.
Uh,
The important thing is to remember, if you think really long and obsess about all the details of the different players and the characters and the trends going up and down,
Maybe you
someti-
lose the plot.
You lose the pot, yes. And then going back to one of the introduction videos, we've already lost the plot.
Yeah. No, we still have the plot right now. We've been on topic.
Yeah,
we have tangented once, and it was about the game. And that
Yeah.
was fine. That was a...
And then there was maybe a few micro tangents there.
yeah.
But anyways, is
No, we've been on topic, damn it.
yeah. But anyways, sometimes you have a group that is really into the social part of, not just the social part in the game, but the social part between each other, hanging out and talking about various things in life and what movies they want to go and watch.
What drama's happening with the family,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
etc. And you have to ask yourself, as the game master, are you okay with that?
Am I okay with only getting through 30 minutes of my prep? Probably. Some days.
Some days, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it
then,
depends on the... I feel like it's a mental preparation to it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I'm the DM and I'm going into a Monday, I assess that there's a certain amount of, we might get this done. Because I understand that's a beer and pretzel group.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that I'm not expecting like the level of focus to a Tuesday or Saturday group of ours. I understand that it's not that full focus, so I have to come to terms with it as the DM of this is how the game is generally going to function. I could demand differently, but I don't think people are going to have as much fun with it differently.
Yeah.
Or at least depending on group, right?
Yeah, you can go with the whole perspective of, like, I have, going back to my old point before we actually like weirdly tangented off into it again.
Yeah.
But you end up going with a group, and you might talk to the various players about what their expectations of the game is, and you might end up with a situation where you might have in that group, you might have a separation of people who, some want to more play the game, and some who are just perfectly fine to just hang out. And that's perfectly fine. The problem then is that the people who really want to play the game might get
frustrated
with the group that just wants to hang out. And the group that just wants to hang out might get frustrated with the people who want to just play the game. So one of the solutions I found that is that what I did is that I noticed that one of the people in the Monday group really wants to get more into the adventures and story and getting things done. So I pointed out, hey, the Tuesday and Saturday.
Talking about Gage?
I was trying to avoid mentioning his name, but sure. But anyways, and he might like pop up on the channel every so often and comment. But I noticed that he really wants to engage and see where this
the story
progresses, and he wants to be more active in the adventure. So I had like offered, hey, we can go over and you can jump in on let's see what the Tuesday dungeon master, which is oftentimes you, but now is actually my brother John.
Yeah.
Or we can talk about the Saturday group. And you might slide over into one of those groups if it's okay with the dungeon master at that time.
And it's an
and
entirely different experience.
play in that group as well as the Monday group, or just leave the Monday group if you just choose to leave. He chose to actually bridge and do both the Monday and the Tuesday group, so he gets a bit of the both. He has the beer and pretzels
I'm
group.
looking forward to when he gets my full-fledged, like, progress-based campaign that actually has, like, a story to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be a nice change of pace.
Right
for
now
him.
he's playing in a chaos game.
Chaos game, yeah, absolutely chaos game.
But anyways, I offered to him this other option of this more focused group, and he took it, and he enjoys going in that group because he gets what he wants more in that situation from that group, because he actually can build a character out, and then we can actually go on an adventure and discover things, and he can interact with various characters in the world more,
Yeah.
as opposed to just the beer and pretzels. And plus, I've also noticed that he also is enjoying the beer and pretzels group now a bit more.
Yeah,
because
he
he's actually
understands that it's a lax one, and he's gonna have like a more focused
Yeah.
session the next day, anyways.
Yeah,
so he can chill and know that he still has D&D to come.
yeah, he's getting like the two different flavors, and he enjoys the two different flavors. But because he now has the second group, he can actually enjoy the first group's dynamic more.
Because he's not just stuck with that flavor.
Yeah, he's just not stuck with that flavor of game in itself. So
it's
that
like you've only got chocolate or you've only got vanilla.
you can love chocolate, but if you have literally nothing but chocolate day after day after day,
You're gonna
after
be
day,
happy to have some vanilla.
Yeah, you're gonna
you got a mix of the both. That's pretty good.
Yeah, or you get some mint.
Well, let's not get too hasty.
I,
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I do like some mint.
We can get some
and strawberry.
pistachio in there. Ooh, pistachio ice cream. Ooh.
And we could go over to this place called Culver's and get some awesome custard.
Yes, yes.
Probably should like get some Culver's sponsorships or
right.
something.
No, okay, wait. What's your advice to those DMs? Keep it. We'll both try and be short and succinct here.
Just try to work through if there's any pattern in which the player engages with the game. Add more of the things that they enjoy the most. If you end up with a dynamic situation where you cannot do that, you might have a situation where you might have a player that's incompatible with the playstyle of the group. In which case, if you're like us, you might create a second group that favors that group of players more, and kind of shuffle and sort the players.
Our groups aren't the same whatsoever.
Yep. Or even just talk with the player and just figure out if there's anything currently happening in their life that's bothering them. Which is probably the hardest one. Thinking about it, I would probably go with the whole adjusting campaigns, mentally working through what they have engaged in the past, and their perception of the game.
Do everything prior to talking to them about it.
Yeah, because as we all know,
we mustn't communicate with our players, not as DMs.
You know what the funny thing is, there's so many YouTubers like, go talk to the players or just find out what their problem is. And yes, that does actually work.
It does work, but it can also create issues as well.
Actually, I should addendum onto that.
Bringing up a potential issue can create the issue to exist.
Yes, there's that creating of new issues if you ask questions, but also sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of times, some other really long in the tooth game masters or dungeon masters who have been running for decades will point out that, hey, even if you ask the player, they probably won't tell you, or they will just say everything's all right.
Maybe they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, correct.
Everything's fine.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
Everything's fine.
I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm having a good time.
Yep.
I enjoy your campaign.
That's so unsettling. But anyways,
it's all good.
Yes. So you might have they actually will talk to you about it, but oftentimes many players will just say or lie to you outright. Or they'll say they're fine, or they will become agitated that you have asked them about it.
Yep. Oh,
in which case,
am I being a problem?
Yeah. In which case,
I need to act differently when I'm in campaign?
in which case we have new problems, and a lot of game
Yep.
masters avoid that situation, trying to talk
He's
to
not
them.
even made it awkward.
Yes. So as I said, probably the first thing is: have you been playing with this person for a long time? Is there a pattern to how they like to play?
It's much easier if you're just like all open from the beginning, right?
Yeah. You adjust the game to fit. You adjust it to mix in stuff that they do like. If they don't do that, you might ask them like a question like, "Is the group not? Does the group get through the story fast enough, or you feel like people are trying to rush you through the story or displace you or anything like that?" Because sometimes if it, that's also a dangerous territory. If there's a statement that implies any type of victimhood
Yep.
upon the person, some people will actually jump on that, and I've actually had that issue with one player at some point where you actually voice a this is a unfair feel at this moment kind of situation,
Yeah.
and that person jumps in and then they explode into a hostile attitude about it, and they might not be directly projecting that at you, but they feel that they've been wronged, and now
Or it's something in the past that's now come up again.
oh yeah, and then they're like trying to push it on the dungeon master. I'm like, oh Jesus, like
Oh,
dial.
dial it back. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I thought I didn't mean to bring it up. I'm sorry.
Yes. So yeah, we've had a player who I might have said something.
Mind you, we have had the absolute opposite as well, where we brought up something and it was a past problem with that player before
Yeah.
in a different group. And they were like, "Thank you for telling me.
Yep.
Let me know if it comes up again." It was like the best experience you could have with bringing up such a thing.
Yeah, it
We-
does happen. I do agree. It does. It did happen, and it
did
does happen.
It can.
But
happen.
yeah, sometimes some people, if you create a victim situation, some people might just embrace it outright and then turn it into a rallying cry
Yep.
to attack the dungeon master.
Yes.
I didn't intend to do that, but it was really fascinating when
like a kobold.
a kobold situation where I might have said like this almost feels like unfair.
Yes.
For a moment, like how does this thing keep peeling, and then just watch the person spiral in on that and
Yep.
start attacking.
Yep.
We probably could still beat it. It just like feels really horrible when the damn thing keeps healing on attacking you.
I are you talking about the thing that I ran or something you've ran? Because
No.
I definitely did that to you guys too.
Yes, that was you now remember that one boss that did,
yeah.
like AoE had that this is something this
He had
is
this aura damage that healed him, and he also had damage on hit. So he
Yeah.
was consistently healing, but they were still doing a good chip overall. But on average, they were winning, but they couldn't feel the progression that they had. Even though they were like level 6s or something, versus something that had like 80 health that they could take down in 2 turns. It was healing so much that they were progressively killing it, but they didn't know.
that's there's like a short list of like characteristics when you give a monster a characteristic that wigs players out.
Paralyzing and stunning.
Paralyzing and stunning, yes, but
Exhaustion.
exhaustion, something that heals constantly.
Self-heal. Oh, yeah.
Things that have a aura of
You
damage.
just lose your turn entirely?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. That's also so you have paralyzation and stunning / losing a turn. So
Oh my god!
if you
As
end
a
up
player, you wait like 6 turns to go by, and then you still don't get your turn because you lost. You're like, I fucking hate this place. I fucking hate this.
so keep in mind it's a good idea to occasionally to paralyze your players' characters.
Just show them who's boss.
Every so often.
I'm joking.
But you don't send over 26 mean locks after them.
Counter argument, or you do.
Or you do. And it becomes a story that you can play off of all the time. Don't if someone doesn't show up to a game, there's not enough people. Over the night, a bunch of characters were snatched up and dragged away. You have these weird claw-like tracks going through the woods. You come upon this cave. You enter it. There's these.
Let me summarize his story, which is a good conclusion to the
Yeah.
video. If your players seem a little disconnected and they stop showing up to some sessions, you gotta stick 25 mean locks on them, paralyze them, make them lose turns. It helps. If you can also inflict permanent diseases or any permanent dismemberment to their character that makes them dissatisfied with playing with it. No, that happened to a certain player in a one shot, and then he said that character was dead to him. Even though you brought his character back, it had a little bit of a disadvantage, and then he didn't. At any point, that character was dead to him. It happened.
Yeah, I know.
It was the dress.
It was a different one. It was a Kuatoa one shot.
But
not the Mean Lock Cave.
Some players you can't make happy. Do what you can to make them happy, finding out what they enjoy.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can't make them happy, and maybe either the session isn't right for them, or maybe the DM isn't right for them.
Or the group.
There's not always something you can do, but you can make your little efforts here and there, and it might be the difference, but it also might not be, and that's not your fault as a person or a failure as a DM.
Yeah.
I think that's the heartwarming ending.
So yeah, just mentally work through their history of playing. It might be just adjusting the campaign a little bit. Then talk with other players. If that doesn't help, maybe talk with them. And then if you realize that it might be a group or Dungeon Master incompatibility issue, you can easily just either direct them to another group or another group you have that might fit them better.
I don't think a lot of people do D&D twice a week.
No, there's a lot of groups out there that probably are in the territory of like once a month.
Yeah. No, we're in like the 3 days a week, so we're on the way high end. We're on like the tippy top end, kind of.
If you made it to the end of this video, the trick we have discovered is that we create a regular day schedule.
Yes.
That we always try to run a game on, no matter what.
If your players can't make it, run a one shot. If you have 2 players and a DM, that's fine. If you have 6 players and a DM, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. It's a good opportunity to, if you say, experiment with some stuff in your little one shots, or run a mini for them. If you know a player is going to be gone, 1 or 2 players are going to be gone for a month. That's also an option.
Mini campaign, 4 sessions, bam, run it out.
Absolutely. It works way better if you just simply have a day. Everyone is available for that day, can show up.
If someone's not, still go.
Still go. Even if it's most of your group.
If you have a player who is angry if you guys play without them, my opinion, they can get over it.
Yeah.
Show this to them right now. Your friends are allowed to have fun without you. They're not wrong for doing it.
Correct.
They're allowed to have friends without you, and that's okay. They're allowed to have fun without you, and that's okay.
Yep.
And they'll have fun with you, too, and that's also great.
Yep. I also find that it's a really good opportunity sometimes to have, when you have those little moments, to not just experiment, but also say, like, maybe run a different tabletop role-playing game system like Call of Cthulhu.
Yes.
Some tabletop role-playing game systems are really good for really small groups, or have their peak vibe to them when you are playing with a small group.
D&D, I don't think goes well with big groups. My opinion.
My personal experience is...
Ooh, hold on. We need to make that a different video.
Yeah.
The size of a group, that's its own video.
Yeah, that's its own video.
That's its own video.
But anyway, yeah, it's a really important point.
All right. We end it there. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep.
I'm glad you guys stayed for whoever did for this long.
Yep. Yep, this was a fun adventure.
All right, see you next time.